For those of you joining today, perhaps you're familiar with Seven Leaf, perhaps you're not. If you're not, just a little bit of background on Seven Leaf. Seven Leaf is a city and state licensed contract manufacturer, processor, and distributor of cannabis products located in Costa Mesa, California, in the heart of Orange County. It offers its clients a one-stop supply chain infrastructure that is a partnership solution to directly support brands. Seven Leaf is a front-running example of a cannabis industry leader with ties to licensed cultivators, testing laboratories to ensure consistent quality of the highest standards throughout the supply chain process, all the way to the final product of any cannabis products from their facility. And as a safe, legal, regulated, and organized cannabis manufacturing, processing, and distribution company, Seven Leaf is able to provide the highest quality cannabis products with consistency, trust, and continued innovation to its clients throughout California. I can attest they definitely have a great infrastructure and setup, and much of that is due to the gentleman joining us today, Mr. Michael Musalli. Welcome.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, of course, of course. So just wanted to kind of jump in today and, kind of get a little bit of your backstory as well. I think everybody that gets into the cannabis industry has a little bit of an interesting story as to how they got into it. Can you share a little bit with us, what got you into the industry in the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. So I, funny enough, started off in wealth management, finance services, in my much younger years. And I moved from that industry into alternative medicine and supplemental sales, supplements, nutraceuticals, things like that. And then from there, I moved into pharmaceutical sales. And I had a very good role, in the pharmaceutical sale industry. And I was on a trajectory to good things, but I just did not like how the industry operated, quite frankly. And so that combined with my two partners in Seven Leaf, Damon and Mateo, who have been friends of mine for over 15 years now. We go back a very long time. The three of us were also kind of just chatting about maybe starting a side business of some sort. And so we've all been cannabis users. And so we said, hey, let's start a dispensary, just like everybody else does typically when they're coming into the industry. And, that quickly evolved into a manufacturing distribution facility and then two facilities. Because of our skill sets in our previous jobs. I think that we felt that if we had opened a retail store, we wouldn't be sort of maximizing our previous experiences in other businesses and other supply chains. And we felt that we could really help shape a growing industry in the manufacturing segment, particularly. So that's kind of how it all started.
Interesting. It's kind of the dream for many people is to be able to start a successful business with their friends or longtime friends. Like that's what most people really dream about. So
it's all who you trust. It's very important. And I think one thing we've seen in this industry over the last 4 or 5 years is that the groups that, started then and are still around, a lot of them are very tight-knit groups. They're groups that, the folks are in the office every day, working hard every day. And so that's been part of our success for sure.
It's not often talked about out loud, but the industry has evolved from a very, from the illicit market. It's what it evolved from. And now it's a legal industry, but there is still a lot of, protection. People are still hesitant to let people in and trust. Like you said, it is a big part of it. And I think that's true for any business, but it's especially true for this one that's developing so quickly. When you started out with and formed the company, what was the vision you had? Like, what was your overarching kind of vision that you see? And are you, have you changed that vision? Has it shifted as the industry has shifted and things have changed?
Our collective vision was always to be a contract manufacturer. And for those of you that may not be sure what that is, contract manufacturing is essentially white labeling. So what we do is brands will come to us and they'll say, hey, can you R&D this product for us? Can you formulate a product for us? Can you help us with the packaging of the product? And then can you help us get that product out into the retail market? And so the easiest kind of comparison I can make is Apple and their iPhones, right? So Apple brands all of their iPhones. They come up with everything, but Foxconn is the one that actually produces all of the parts inside of the iPhone. And so that's really what contract manufacturing is. And so, most other mature industries out there have contract manufacturing segments for those industries. And so for us, we thought it'd be a little bit more exciting, a little bit more of a wider scope of work if we were able to do something like that versus just have a singular brand. But, obviously, the industry has evolved and we have evolved with it, and we've implemented some different kinds of processes. We've branched out into different types of products, and we've stopped producing other types of products. So we have evolved as the cannabis industry has evolved across all levels of the operation, frankly. But at the core, we still do what we do, which is contract manufacturing.
I think something that's crucial for people that may not be aware of how California is structured, how manufacturing kind of works into that supply chain and those verticals. Can you go into a little bit of an explanation as to what that supply chain here in California looks like and how manufacturing at Seven Leaf kind of works into that supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So in California, we have a supply chain made up of several segments. The first segment is the cultivators, right? They're the folks that grow the flower. And then we have the manufacturers. The manufacturers are the ones that manipulate the flower into different types of products, oils and concentrates, topicals, edibles, these sorts of products, right? Then we have the distributors, and the distributors in the state of California's setup essentially are kind of the ones with the most oversight and power, if you will, the most responsibility in the supply chain. They're responsible for collecting and remitting the taxes, the excise tax and the cultivation tax for the state, as well as they are the only ones that can call for a testing lab to come and test the products, which is the other part of the segment, in order for those products to clear and make it into the retail stores. And then the retailers are the last part of the supply chain. So essentially you have cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, retail, and then hovering out here, you have testing labs, because the labs work with manufacturers as well as distributors. They work with the manufacturers for what we call R&D tests. So these are lab tests that will give the manufacturer an idea of what they're dealing with in a product. And then they also work with the distributors on what we call the final form lab tests. And these are the lab tests that actually clear the product for the distributor to be able to take it to a retailer. So one of the most common things when folks reach out to us to start a new brand is they say, hey, I want to make a new brand and I want to sell it on the internet. Or, hey, I want to make a new brand and I'm just going to do the sales and I'm going to bring it to the stores myself. And I always have to explain that, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's a much more closed loop and tighter regulatory system than that. So as far as Seven Leaf, we sit right there in the manufacturing segment. Over the last few years, part of our evolution has been to really focus a lot more on the manufacturing versus the distribution side of things. So we do use our distribution arm to call the testing labs to be able to certify the products that we manufacture for our customers. So in that sense, we're that one-stop shop where you can come, have the product made, have it ready to go on the shelf. And then typically what our customers do is they call their own distributors to come pick it up from us, and then they take it to the retail. And so that's we're nestled right in the middle of the supply chain. But because of what we do and dealing with a multitude of brands across the state, we really have very good insights into the cultivation and to the retail side of things because we are the middlemen. And so we understand both of those worlds pretty well. Even though we're not actively in them on a day-to-day basis.
Now, you mentioned that distribution has a lot of authority in this supply chain, more or less. As a manufacturer, would it, because this is a conversation I often have, but from your perspective as a manufacturer, would it make more sense for the testing to be done at a different level, for some of that responsibility with taxes and testing to be done at earlier levels in the supply chain? from your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the reason that this was set up the way it was is that the state of California, they were following the alcohol model, right? It's very similar, where the distributor is responsible for a lot of these things as well, alcohol sales. However, in our industry, especially where our testing thresholds are so low and so conservative. What do I mean by that? To give you an idea, let's say we make an edible product and we're putting chocolate in there, right? We're sourcing the chocolate from somewhere, right? The cocoa or, the sugars and these sorts of things, right? Even if we're manufacturing the overall product, we're sourcing materials. What we often see is that the cannabis will pass the regulatory requirements for testing, but the chocolate may fail. And that just shows how conservative the testing requirements are in California for cannabis. The testing regulations are the most conservative out of any industry out there for cannabis. So going back to your earlier question, yes, it definitely would help if manufacturers were able to have a little bit more accessibility to testing on more of a final form standpoint, because we do not want product batches to fail. We want to know and see what's coming. The problem with that is there's the inherent conflict of interest of a manufacturer having a lab test the products that they're making and then putting the final seal of approval on it. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario. But what we find here is that if you do an ample amount of R&D lab tests, and you typically test the product with the same lab that you test the R&D batches on with the final form batch, it's the same lab that does both, we see less variance and we have a much more comfortable idea of the product is going to pass and we are not going to have any problems. It's when you start using multiple labs for the same batch of product at different parts in the process where we see things really break down.
Yeah. Agreed. Now, I happen to know you're based there in Costa Mesa. Costa Mesa is going through its own licensing process right now, a different licensing process than what you went through originally to set up Seven Leaf. But what is it like going through that? Because I think most people talk about barriers to entry, and that licensing process and getting set up is the main barrier of entry. What is that like? Can you talk a little bit about the process of getting licensed for a manufacturer here in California?
Well, you see my beard, all the gray hair. That's what it's like.
That's why I keep mine thin.
So no, it's been a long process. So in Costa Mesa here, we were one of the first manufacturers and distributors in Orange County to get fully licensed. So Costa Mesa opened up their process at beginning of say it's 2016, 2017-ish. They opened the process here for wholesale businesses, meaning manufacturing, distribution, lab testing. And we were one of the first to go through it. And what I can tell you is that while the city is excited and looking forward to having us open up and generate taxes, there was just a general lack of knowledge across the board about our industry and about what we do and about how manufacturing labs work, what extraction techniques we have, right? Just basic stuff that you cannot necessarily expect the city to understand.
Right.
But what that meant for us was we had to spend a lot more time and a lot more money in order to get the city comfortable to the point where they understood what we were doing, they trusted what we were doing, and there was sort of that level of mutual respect going forward. And we have two facilities in Costa Mesa. The first one is a non-volatile manufacturing facility with distribution, and the second one's a volatile manufacturing distribution facility with distribution. And that first facility took about a year and a half to open, and it's pretty much a co-packing facility. We don't do any heavy extraction in that facility. It's co-packing, R&D, packaging, these sorts of things. The second facility is where we do all of our heavy extraction. And in that facility, it was 2 years and 6 months to open. It was a very long process. And because it was a volatile manufacturing facility, the amount of fire code and building code, both state and local, that we had to comply with, it was very challenging. And so I always like to joke with people that, after going through that process, I could probably open a cafe on the moon and it would be easier and quicker and cheaper. So it was a process. Obviously we're very proud of it now. And quite frankly, we've become a bit of a staple for surrounding cities. I mean, just yesterday we had the Huntington Beach Fire Department here, the Costa Mesa Fire Department invited that. They called us, asked, can we give them a tour? So we do tours to politicians. It's like, because we really went the extra mile to build the facility properly, but it was a very long and unfortunately painful process.
Yeah, there's a lot of regulations around any kind of cannabis operation, even a retail store, which doesn't do anything like that. I imagine the build out on a volatile extraction facility is much more intense from a build out perspective, fire code perspective, because there have been some concerns, when you talk to a lot of city officials, they'll admit this is one of their concerns. So I imagine it is quite rigorous indeed.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I can say is that I think cities they start to understand a little bit more now that cannabis in general isn't as big of a security threat as they had thought. And they understand that the operators coming into the space and the facilities we're building are serious facilities and we're serious operators. And so I think that level of a little bit of uncomfortability, fear of hazardous explosions, these sorts of things has come down quite a bit. I mean, even just yesterday, the Huntington Beach Fire Department, they were like, "Hey, this is amazing." And to be honest with you, this isn't as bad. This isn't as hazardous as we had in our head. This looks much more put together. So it's just a matter, I think, of education and time and really explain to people what we put into these facilities.
Agreed. You talked a little bit earlier about, the structure of doing white labeling and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the process, the different types of, extraction, the hydrocarbon and some of the different extraction methods that you all do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few main types of extraction that you'll typically see these days. The first one is what we call solvent-less extraction, which is either typically done through a mechanical press, which uses heat and pressure to extract cannabinoids out of the flower, or through a more traditional method like ice water, right, to create an agitation, which would create like an ice water hash. These are like solvent-less extraction methods. The second grouping is CO2 extraction. The third grouping is chilled ethanol extraction. Both of these extraction methods are typically used to produce your oils, both your crude oil and your distillate oil. And then the fourth type of extraction you're typically going to see is called hydrocarbon or light hydrocarbon extraction. This would be butane, propane, hexane, heptane, these types of extractions. The most common being butane, propane, and some blend. And when we talk about butane and propane extraction, it's people always think, barbecue grill, propane tank. No, it's not. It's liquid form of butane and propane. And you can mix these solvents together in order to achieve different desired types of output on the product. So those are kind of the main categories. And a lot of the questions are always driven, well, why use one over the other? And what it really comes down to is output of product, what you're trying to make. One thing that we really specialize in at Seven Leaf is concentrates, and specifically live concentrates. Live concentrates are concentrates that are made from a fresh frozen plant. So what does that mean? It means that the plant is grown, it's cut, it's bucked, so all of the water leaves and additional leaves and stuff are taken off. And the plant is then frozen right away with all of the buds still intact. And it's frozen and remains frozen at typically anywhere from -10 to -30 degrees until it's ready for extraction, in which case it goes right into the extractor machine and is run. This gives you a product with approximately 50 to 70% more terpenes than you would get in a regular cured flower product. That's simply because of degradation of flower over time. You're going to lose terpenes over time, and some of your THCA is going to convert to THC again because of just natural processes. So the live products, you may have heard of live resin, terpene sauce, or HTE it's called. These are live butters, live sauces, all of these products are typically much more aromatic and have much more flavor than some of your cured products. And so that's sort of the niche that we really love and we really focus heavily on. But with that said, we also run a lot of cured flour into concentrates, your crumbles, your batters, your regular cured sugars, things like this. And so those are the main areas of focus. And, most recently, we've set up a larger solvent-less room. We used to do quite a bit of rosin through mechanical presses. Yeah. But now we're taking it back a step in the supply chain or the production chain, I should call it, and getting into water hash and stuff like this. And nice. Again, that's we discussed earlier, an evolution of the market. Folks are wanting more of these solventless products. So we've adapted. And they're really, for 7-leaf, solventless, and hydrocarbon are the two main focuses of extraction. We also do some ethanol extraction as well, but typically speaking, we focus really on the hydrocarbon as number one, and then the solventless is number two.
Yeah, I remember just a few years ago, it was most things seemed to be BHO, PHO, and it felt like there was a little bit of a movement talking about propane and butane. If it's not flushed properly, it could have some residuals, and that being a concern. Is the movement towards these solventless, products, is that more of a health concern or just a quality as far as, the taste of the product? What trends have you seen in the shifting of the market demand there?
I think it's a bit of both. And the reality is, in California in general, consumers are not as up to speed on cannabis products, types of products, extraction methods, than they are in some other states like, say, Colorado or Oregon. So a lot of times what we see are these, what I call hot trends, where we see the market all of a sudden take a shift and want this type of product for 3 or 4 months, and then it sort of dissipates, right? Because it's the hot thing at that time. And these are a lot of our buzzwords, like solventless is a buzzword. Now, to your point about the hydrocarbon extraction and the concern of solvents being left over, this was a real concern prior to legalization, because people were not using the type of equipment that we use these days. They were doing this stuff, extracting in their yard with a piece of PVC pipe, and they were pouring liquid butane down, and amongst other things like explosions and serious issues, the product was filled with the solvent because it wasn't processed properly, and it was Mickey Mouse job. But then again, back then, equipment didn't exist for this at the scale it exists now. So what I will tell you is that our extraction equipment we use and our post-processing extraction equipment we use is the same equipment, typically speaking, that folks of large flour and essential oil producers use. It is certified by third-party engineers to be a safe and what we call closed loop. So there's no leaking. There's nowhere for the gas or the liquid to come out. And it's certified to be safe and clean, right? And so that's why it costs millions of dollars to build these facilities out, because this equipment is serious equipment. Yeah. And so between the extraction these days and the post-processing equipment and machines that we use, and then the safety net is always the lab test. A lab test does not lie. And in California, the limits are so low, there is essentially nothing left in that product, period, in order for it to make it to market. Yeah. So consumers can be confident if they're going and they're buying a live resin or sugar or a live sauce or whatever it may be, and it comes from a hydrocarbon extraction, if it is in a legal dispensary from a legal manufacturer, it is a 100% clean product.
Yeah, I think people would not believe this, but the truth of the matter is most of the fruits and vegetables they buy and consume at the store would not pass cannabis testing. In fact, none of it would, and really. So definitely the most stringently tested products in the country, probably.
To your point, there's a pesticide called mycobutanol that's used, and mycobutanol is consistently sprayed on most of the agricultural crops in California. And early on in the cannabis, recreational cannabis industry here, what was happening is all these growers of cannabis would have farms half a mile or a mile away from a tomato farm, and they were failing for mycobutanol, because what was happening is the farmer here was spraying the mycobutanol all over their crop, right? To keep the pests off and all this. And the wind was taking it and the soil was taking it over to the other farm. And because our testing limits are so much lower,
right,
the batches were failing. So it took farmers quite a while to figure out, okay, well, what do? We have to basically either relocate, or we're going to have to put greenhouses up or do indoor growing. Otherwise, we're going to have contaminated products. So that's a perfect point you make.
Yeah. It's been an issue up north too in the wine country. I know that they've had to really try and work with the grape people that grow the grapes, because they can't be too close to those vineyards for just that reason. Another really popular product, California especially here, is vapes. What can you tell us a little bit about how that process is a little bit different, and why vapes? Why are they so popular here in California in particular?
So I'll answer the second question first. I think that vapes are really popular for two reasons. One, convenience, right? It's much easier to take a hit off of a vape, put it back in your pocket, and keep moving on with your day. You don't have to get out a pipe. You don't have to get out a bong or another smoking device and break up and grind flour, right? So it's just a convenience thing, I think. Number two, potency. Most vapes that are out there have a potency anywhere from 75%, 80%, all the way up to 95% of THC. So typically, in the younger crowds, we see folks that, they want to have a great experience with cannabis and, quite frankly, get as high as possible. They're hitting vapes because they need one or two hits off of a vape to have the same effect if they were to take 5 or 6, 7 hits off of flower. So I think these are a couple of things that are playing into the equation. Now, as of types of vapes and how to make vapes, this gets into a much deeper conversation, because there's all kinds of types of vapes in the market, but typically we see a few different ones. We see what we call vapes, distillate-based vapes. We see solvent-less vapes, and we see what we call sauce or terpene type vapes, right? Live resin vapes. There's so many different names for them, but they all fall under the same category. So the distillate vapes are your most common vape. And the way distillate vapes are typically made is they use a distillate oil, which is a purified THC. It's at a molecular level, it's purified THC. So you might have THC distillate at 85%, let's say 90%, right? That's pure THC. So that's one ingredient. And then typically we see one of two other ingredients inside of a vape from proper manufacturers. One is cannabis-derived terpenes. The other are botanical-derived terpenes. Cannabis-derived terpenes are terpenes that come from the cannabis plant itself. And botanical-derived terpenes are terpenes that mimic the cannabis-derived terpenes, but come from other plants. So let's take a step back here. What are terpenes? Every flower has a strain name. Why does it have a strain name? Why is blueberry cookies called blueberry cookies? Because when you smoke it, it has the flavor and the aroma of blueberry, right? So what gives it the flavor and the aroma? Terpenes. These are the main component outside of the cannabinoids that give each strain its unique set of taste, feeling, effects, all these sorts of things. Because at the molecular level, every cannabis plant has THC, may have some CBD, may have some other cannabinoids, but it's really the icing on the cake that gives it a different flavor, right? So the botanical terpenes are found in all plants of nature, and cannabis-derived terpenes are only found in cannabis plants, but a lot of times these terpenes are overlapping. Myrcene, limonene, right? Pinene. These are found in both cannabis plants and in regular botanical plants, and they're exactly the same. Exactly the same. So that's, typically what will happen is you'll have your distillate and you'll have cannabis-derived terps or botanical terps, and that will give you your standard distillate vape, which will mimic the strain that you are looking for. So if you go buy a distillate, a cart, or you go to the store, a retailer, and you ask, hey, what distillate carts do you have? I'm looking for a Jack Herer. I'm looking for a Gorilla Glue, whatever it may be. They will give you a vape cart that has distillate and terpenes to mimic that strain, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that one. Let's talk about the live resin strains, or what you may have heard of diamond sauce cartridges. Yeah. Okay. This is a much more complex conversation, but at a very high level, the way to make this type of cartridge is usually through a hydrocarbon extraction using butane or propane. And what is happening here is whatever is going in is coming out and being refined. You're not adding to supplement to try to mimic the strain. This is the strain.
I see.
So let's say you have a Jack Herer strain, right? And we run it through a hydrocarbon extraction. We'll get a crude oil from that extraction that has all of the terpenes. It hasn't been distilled or refined. It has all of the original elements of the plant. And then we will take that and we will basically use that after some post-processing in the vape cartridge to give you the exact strain in a concentrated form in a cart to smoke. As the market is progressing and evolving and consumers are getting more educated, this is the direction the market is heading, because it's like wine. People understand there's always the $9 bottle of wine that if I'm just looking to have a great time one night and not really care about the taste or the effect, that works great. But if I really want to have a connoisseur product and understand what I'm really get that flavor, really get that experience, I'm going to go for probably the $30 bottle of wine. Right. So we're seeing that shift in the market. And then the last main category I talked about is a solvent-less, which is a very similar concept to the hydrocarbon extracted ones, where you're basically extracting from a strain of flower. Typically you're starting with a little bit of a different kind of flower material than you are on the hydrocarbon side. And then you're going through a process, let's say an ice wash, and you're creating bubble hash out of that. And then from there, you're post-processing your bubble hash and manipulating your bubble hash and putting it into a cartridge. So again, it's no additives if you're doing it right, as you should be as a proper manufacturer. No additives, really just the pure plant there, right? So those are the three categories you'll typically see for vape cartridges.
Interesting. And and you also do a lot of work with infused products. What is the most popular type of infused products? I know I see a lot of infused pre-rolls in particular on the market.
Pre-rolls, you hit it on the head. Yeah. Pre-rolls, I mean, we typically don't deal with a lot of edibles over here. We just kind of started branching into some gummies and doing those, but we don't do baked goods or anything like this. But the majority of our customers that come to us come for infused pre-rolls, and pre-rolls can ultimately be infused a million different ways. But I will tell you this: a lot of folks think, how hard can it be? It's flour. You just put some concentrate in there. You paint some distillate on it, and that's it, right? It is an art. It is very hard to get consistency and quality at high volume for infused pre-rolls, because you have to worry about a multitude of things. The number one is we're dealing with a crop here that always has different variables. You're never going to get the same crop that works the same in your hands, that applies the same, that has the same density, same humidity. These things all change the process. Then you have different oils you're working with. Same thing. It's a natural product here. There's variation to it. Then you've got to worry about things like clogging. Are you putting too much concentrate in there? How are you putting the concentrate in there? Is it lightly being put on? Are you jamming it all in there? And then now the user only gets halfway through the joint and then it clogs up. So there's all these different variables, but we've done a ton of R&D, and we do produce some infused pre-rolls for some of the biggest brands in the state right now, and we do volume.
So you talk about R&D. How does the sampling regulations affect your ability to do like market research or to ask clients, hey, we just developed this product. What do you think about it? Should we take this to scale?
Yeah, it makes it tough because the sampling regulations are so stringent and they're very hard in large volumes from a compliance standpoint to keep working with over and over and over again, because they put so much time and work for such a small thing on the the plates of our staff members. So typically what we do is we kind of have our own staff who are very experienced in a multitude of products, go ahead and try R&D products to get them to the point. So they're not even leaving our facility, to get them to the point where we are comfortable then going out and sampling out to our additional customers, to our retail shops, to whoever it may be, and getting their feedback. But the majority of it's done on the back end to the point where we get confident that we just are looking for the green light, as opposed to round after round after round,
Right.
and have to worry about metric, sampling paperwork every single time. It becomes too much.
Yeah. As we're approaching our hour here a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about the industry. It's still growing a lot, and there are a lot of smaller groups, trying to break into the industry. Is there still room in the industry for these groups to break in, to get a foothold and carve out a little piece of the industry for them? And how can some of those barriers to entry, be overcome, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, look, as an entrepreneur, I always look in the positives, and I always believe there's always room for everybody, right? Especially in an industry like cannabis. It's a widely consumed product. The market is growing. The legal market is growing, I should say. And so, there's always room. But with that said, expectations are very important, right? People need to understand what they're getting into. And whenever people ask me, what do I need to know or what I need to expect? It's such a big conversation, but I always have a simple principle, which is be prepared for whatever you want to do, whether it's start a brand, start a manufacturing facility, get into cultivation, start retail, whatever it may be. Prepare for it to take 3 times as long as whatever your time has allotted for, and prepare for it to cost you at least 3 times as much.
Yeah.
That rule has yet to be broken or not, followed through with, right? Everybody who I always talk to early on, they come back and like, you were right. And I was like, believe me, I've been through this a few times. I know how it goes. So it's really, there's always room, right? Especially in branding. Branding it's just like any other industry, right?
Yeah.
You can have 10 colas, but why is Coke and Pepsi? Why are they the 2 main ones? Because of branding. So if you have a good marketing, branding, and understanding and background, there's always room to make those products. But on the wholesale side of things, what we're witnessing in California right now is massive decreases in wholesale pricing. And the reason for this is because there's not enough retail stores. There's only about 850 legal retail stores in the state of California. So process that for a minute. 850 serve the whole state of California.
Yeah.
Comparison, Oklahoma, which also has a recreational market, has over 2,000. So just the math doesn't make sense here. And a lot of that is also because of the way Prop 64 was written and legalization was passed. And unfortunately, Prop 64 gave each city the power to determine whether they want legal cannabis in their city or not. And 60% or 65% of cities are still saying no thanks. So it's an uphill battle. But then that means because there's only 850 shops, there's a lot of price crunching going on, because there's a lot more manufacturers and a lot more distributors and a lot more cultivators out there producing. And all that product is getting funneled onto very few shelves. So these are things to understand, and it's not to be deterrent, but also be realistic, because the price of distillate 4 years ago was $14 or $15 a gram. The price of distillate today is $2 a gram.
Yeah.
So it's the evolution of the industry finding itself and the regulations trying to work themselves out to have the legal market get a better grasp on the illicit market and overall consumption potential in California. So yeah, those are just some of the things I see here.
Yeah, I experienced that race to the bottom a few years ago up in the Washington state market when it was a terrible race to the bottom of pricing up there as well. Seems like a trend that has to happen for the maturation of the market as well. As you've kind of gone through all these challenges, what have been some of your biggest challenges, and what are the lessons you've learned from overcoming them along the way?
Yeah, I mean, challenges, there's been a lot.
Or are the current challenges the biggest?
The current challenges are always the biggest, because the previous challenges, you're either here and you overcame them or you didn't.
That's true.
So, but as far as challenges go, I think, just understanding the regulation. And I don't mean reading the regulation and saying, okay, I know what that means. I mean, applying it to everyday operation and figuring out how to run a company that's cash flow positive. It's very tough in this industry, between the taxation, the compliance costs, the operational costs that we face as cannabis, it's not what everybody thinks it is. It's not a gold mine. It's not. It can be as soon as things start to level out, as soon as we have more legal dispensaries, as soon as taxation comes down, right? These are all things, as soon as the black market gets cleaned up a little bit more. But right now, it's just understanding, in my opinion, success is judged by reputation and longevity. This is a long haul play in this industry right now for legal operators, and learning how to adapt expectations early on of, oh, this is going to be skyrocketing in the second year, to this is a 10-year plan now. That's challenging, but you have to understand how to do that and how to keep kind of rolling with the punches. And the other side of this equation was the side of politics, which I've never been in politics. I never plan to get in politics, but the reality is because we're dealing with a brand new industry here, and we're dealing with cities that are just coming around to legalize the industry in a state that's just legalizing it at a recreational level, we are thrown into the den with the policymakers. And so understanding how to balance what we really need on a day-to-day basis with working with these policymakers so that they know us, they trust us, they believe in us, they believe in our industry, they know we're good, sound operators, but also balancing how do we get what we want with what politics and what the general public may want. That's all been a challenge as well too over the last 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. As you look at the challenges presented by the industry today, what does the future hold for Seven Leaf? What are your plans going into the future?
Yeah, I mean, for us, look, we are continuing to expand here at Seven Leaf. We're very fortunate that we built our facilities out to be able to produce extremely large volumes. So we have quite a ways to go before I would even need to think about, looking into a third facility. But at this point, we're just continuing to help customers, bring on customers, grow customers, create new products, these sorts of things. And, eventually we'll probably look to work a little bit further back in the supply chain and maybe acquire or start a cultivation site so that we can start to also help feed our own pipeline of flower needed for different jobs, as opposed to only sourcing the flower like we do now throughout the state. So that's kind of where we're at, but we're looking towards the horizon here and just trying to figure out, what's the best path forward to continue to grow our business, but also kind of help the industry as a whole keep moving forward.
Awesome. I want to take a few minutes here before we close out and just open it up for questions from the attendees. So if anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand, or you can simply type it in the chat if you'd like. While their questions are coming up, where can people find out more about Seven Leaf? Can they follow you online? Marketing is very limited for our industry, but of course, we do what we can.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our website, sevenleaf.com, as well as an Instagram account as well. It's I think _ Seven Leaf _. So those are from a social media perspective where you can find us, and then we're always out and about in the community. We were just at Hall of Flowers, had a booth over there. So we're pretty active, both in Costa Mesa as well as at large throughout the state. Sometimes we'll go up north for different events, as well as different policy events and stuff like this. So you can definitely find us.
So as a personal question, you're heavy in the extraction and manufacturing. As a personal preference, like, what do you enjoy consuming? If you don't mind answering.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I do consume cannabis. I wouldn't consider myself a heavy user, a heavy consumer, but Friday night, I want to relax and hang out. I'm much more of a indica type effect guy, and so I really like sauce products, diamond sauce, these sorts of things, whether it's a concentrate or the cart. Typically, I'm more on the cart side of things. I also like infused pre-rolls. Those are kind of my two go-tos. Edibles for me are a little tough. I have a very, very low tolerance. So it's even a couple milligrams can put me out for a second. So it's pretty funny. It's been interesting exploring my tolerance levels and my preferences over the last 2-4 years. As you know, we produce new products, and I always get to try them to see what I like and what I don't like. So, but definitely, yeah, I'd say a infused pre-roll kind of guy, and anything live sugar, live sauce, these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think another factor also has to do with our age. As we get older, our preferences certainly change a bit as well.
Oh, okay. I see Amy's question here. Was a product after the distillate? Okay, so yeah, Amy, that product. There's a couple of different names for it. It all is typically derived from a hydrocarbon extraction, but the product names can vary. You'll typically see sauce cartridges. That's one. Diamond sauce cartridges. That's another. Or live resin cartridges. Those are really the three main kind of names you'll hear. They're all produced a little bit differently from each other, but essentially they all come from the same source, and it is all from the plant, from the original plant, the original strain.
Next question from Mr. Roger Tower is, what do you think is the next big trend in heavy hitting products, as in what producing the most potent product? That's an interesting question, because, I often, this is good to get your opinion on it as well, because education you talked about a lot. And I feel like and this was my experience in Washington State as well. It was a race to the bottom price wise, because it was how much THC can I get for the cheapest price? And I feel like there's so much more to, the products than that, as you've talked about the terpenes and everything else.
Yeah, you're 100% right. We've seen the same thing right now. And Roger, to answer your question, pre-rolls. I mean, that's right now. It's like pretty much if you can't produce a 35% pre-roll,
wow,
we don't want to talk to you. Is what the retailers are telling the brands from an infused pre-roll standpoint. So we're seeing that number get ratcheted. But and the reality is that as a manufacturer, I don't particularly like it, because I don't. Again, I'm about the experience of the product. We love what we do because it's about the experience, giving the consumer the full experience of the strain. And when it comes down to just how high can I get, you can literally just put distillate in a cart with some basic terpenes at 95% and have at it. But you're missing the whole, I think, point of the plant, quite frankly.
Where can we accomplish that education? Do you think that falls to the brands, or do you? Or state government, or like who does this fall to? The retailers. That's what it falls to. Primarily, it is the retailers and their staff. What we call the bud tenders, right? The folks that would help you at a dispensary. It falls on their shoulders, because when a customer comes in and says, "Hi, I'm looking for the highest percentage THC product," as opposed to saying, "Cool, this is brand X, Y, and Z I have here," right. The question should be, okay, I understand. Is there a particular reason you're looking for high THC? Is it for pain? Is it for recreation? Right. And the exploratory conversation should go on from there. Now, it's not only on the retailers, but also the brands, because the brands have to do a good job to explain why is their product at a 70 or 65% THC, let's say a concentrate. Why is that product a better product than something at a 95%, right? It's on them too. And lastly, it's the state of California. State of California has to do a good job of educating the public, which they are. They have something called This is Legal Cannabis. This is California Cannabis. It's a campaign they've launched. As a matter of fact, we had the DCC at our facility yesterday, and they did a photo shoot with all of us, and they're going to be featuring us as one of the first manufacturers in this campaign. And it was a very, very great campaign to hear. It's going to be billboards. It's going to be marketing materials. It's going to be internet presence. So they're really trying to go out there and create an understanding for our industry, what we do, the products we make. And all of these things help, but really it starts at the retail level, because that's where you have the opportunity to interact with the consumer right then and there. And there's one more question in the chat, but before we get to that, to wrap up, touching on that, do you think that it would make any difference if the state required a more detailed, like a terpene profile on the packaging for the consumers to, have something else on there besides just THC and CBD?
Yeah, I think so. And, funny you brought that up, because we were talking with one of the folks higher up in the part of the manufacturer branch of the DCC. And she was telling me that there is something that will be coming down the pipeline that will sort of address vapes a little bit differently than they've been addressed. And I think, again, it's about transparency, right? You always want to know what you're buying as a consumer. I'm a full believer behind that. And so if that is a direction the state takes, we will be happy to do that. And that's because we also have nothing to hide except great product, right? So
absolutely.
If a customer is looking for a specific type of flavor in a product like limonene, right? Or they want more of like a citrus taste, right? They'll be able to identify that in the product if legislation were to pass to require something like this. So I definitely think it helps.
Interesting. Last question of the day from Virginia Casey. What innovations are you seeing in controlled dose products? I do outreach to the senior community, and dose control is one of their major concerns.
So dosaging mostly starts not with the manufacturer, with the hardware. So that's what we typically see. So the dosist, I'm sure many of you folks have heard of them, right? They've got their dosing pen. And from a formulation standpoint, we can formulate for dosaging as needed. The problem then becomes for most products, edibles are a little bit different, but for most either inhaled or orally swallowed products, like chewable products, we can do that relatively easily. But the problem is, what are you putting it into, right? What kind of a hardware do you have? So that's where it all comes down to it. What I can tell you is that a company like Airgraft, they do vaporizers and they do pod type vaporizers. They have engineered hardware that lets you know every 2 milligrams of vapor you inhale, it vibrates. Wow. It's pretty cool, right? So like that's something new. We talked about doses they have. There's Click. They're a spray, oral spray company. They've engineered hardware themselves to go ahead so you know exactly how many milligrams you're getting every time you press the oral spray down. So it really just always comes back to the hardware, because again, on the formulation side, it's a matter of numbers, right? And understanding batch sizes and all this. So we're seeing advances. The problem is with COVID over the last couple of years, a lot of the folks that had these types of products in development have been severely stalled. So, we're seeing our customers are having major issues with receiving packaging, receiving hardware. It's, it just is what it is. The world is a little bit different now. So we'll see. Hopefully that all gets a little bit more back on track and innovation can continue for this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Michael, I greatly appreciate your time today. It's been very insightful, and I think a lot has, we could probably continue talking for a long time, but I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule today. I also want to remind people that if you haven't checked it out, please check out the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce's events page on the website. That's thecannabischamber.com. /events. On there, you will see all of our events listed, even today's event, which will disappear very soon. But the next event coming up is on March 8th. It'll be our first in-person event of the year for the Inland Empire's Spring Expo and Mixer. Should be a fantastic event, getting a lot of response on that. So please be sure to check out the page for that. Michael, again, thank you so much. And
thank you.
We'll see everybody next time.